Arcade Heroes.
Hey everyone, it's Adam with ArcadeHeroes.com coming to you with a news update, a status update on Sega. As I'm sure you might have seen already, there are a lot of, or pretty much every gaming website out there is saying that Sega is exiting the arcade business, and that's the headline that a lot of sites, major sites, are going with. But that's not accurate, so I wanted to get the correct information out there. And so I do have a blog post about this, but I know not a lot of people don't read the blog. So hopefully a video may be a better way to get this information out there and correct the record, so to speak. So for you to understand how Sega's set up, it's somewhat complicated, but I'll try to keep it simple. And so before the pandemic, there were a few divisions in Sega that had something to do with arcade amusements. And so one of those was game development and manufacturing, and that would be things like Sega AM1, Sega AM2, those sorts of groups that were dedicated to developing games. Now you had Sega Japan, but you also had what was called Sega Amusements International. And Sega Amusements International handled development of games for Western markets like North America, whereas the other divisions would handle game development in Japan, and they would be the ones that would be developing stuff like Initial D, or there's that rhythm game Tunithim, I hope I said that right, or there's also a platform called All.net Cross Multi, which is better known as APM3, which is kind of like Steam for arcades. It's a digital distribution service where arcades would download a game and be able to offer that to their customers, but they have to pay a revenue share on that. And so that's one part of Sega with some subparts, I guess you could say. And then you had the arcade operations division, the sites, the venues. So in Japan, it's well known that there were a lot of arcades that had the big Sega name on them, and quite a few famous places that were branded with the Sega name. And so that was handled by that specific division. And even with that, in that there were subparts. You had Sega Joypolis, which was their theme parks, and then you had the other Sega arcades, which were what we're talking about mainly here with the news today. Now, back in November 2020, a company called Genda, G-E-N-D-A, they purchased 85% of Sega's arcade operations division. They didn't buy the Joypolis theme parks. They also did not buy the Sega development teams. Now, Sega at the time did greatly downsize their development output and move some of those people over to consoles and to the console divisions, and there were some people who retired as well. But what happened for the Western side of Sega when they were doing all these changes was that Sega Out West didn't really have any operations to speak of. That was mainly in Japan. But again, they sold that to Genda, and so that's really when Sega exited the arcade operations business, but they did not fully exit the arcade business in general. But again, that's what a lot of these websites are saying with their headlines or saying in their stories. And so unfortunately, it's just a lot more complicated than that. So to reiterate, the Sega name will not disappear from arcades. At least for now, it's still going to be there in some degree. Yes, there are a lot of Sega arcade sites in Japan which will lose that name and will be replaced with something called Gaigo or Gigo, or maybe it's pronounced Jigo. Gotta try and get it right for how you pronounce it in Japanese. But still, the Sega Joypolis still exists. In fact, they just put out a promotion video yesterday, maybe to go against any misconceptions about that. And Sega still owns that, unless of course they decide to sell that off. And then Sega game development also continues. I'm not sure how extensive it is in Japan at the moment. As I mentioned, it has been downsized. But Sega Amusements International exists, and they are still manufacturing and selling games. And last year, I believe it was, they did what's called a management buyout. And so they were already based in the UK. and as their name implies, International, they were handling pretty much all Sega developments outside of Japan and selling games there. And they just released Mission Impossible Arcade DX, the deluxe model, and they have ATV Slam Standard coming, they have VR Agent coming out by March, and Men in Black as well, and they have other games that are in development and coming down the pipe. So the Sega name is not fully disappearing from arcades in general like that. Unfortunately, yes, it is disappearing from many arcade sites. I think the number I saw was 197 different sites over in Japan, but again, it's not completely disappearing in general. So hope that clears it up for anybody who hasn't been sure. But stay tuned to arcadeheroes.com for more news, and news where I understand the arcade business. Of course, if I do get something wrong, then I try and correct it, but that's the latest there. So stay tuned for more, and we'll catch you on the next video.